Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Mondays. This is episode 57 and today guys I have a really exciting announcement because I have achieved a great milestone. I have completed the last 3 weapon teams for my bolt action Imperial Japanese Army, and with these 3 weapon teams completed I have now finished my 1000 point army for bolt action. Absolutely fantastic. Really just happy with achieving this milestone, getting these models done. I think I've got over 1,000 points actually, because you can't, well, we'll get into the details later, but I've got over 1,000 points. The long story short is that I have completed the Japanese for bolt action, and with that we can put these guys to one side for a moment and we can continue painting some glorious Imperial Guard, and that's exactly what I've been doing. It didn't take me too long to get those weapon teams done, and I've actually made great progress on another infantry squad for 3rd Platoon, and the plan is to focus on the Guard until 3rd Platoon is totally finished. That's going to be 3 more infantry squads, senior officer and a commissar for that platoon, and then also we need to get the heavy weapon teams done for that platoon, the veterans, because every platoon's got heavy weapon teams, every platoon's got veterans, and then also the auxiliary support. So that's the plan going forward. But before we dive into what we're going to be doing in the future, let's take a look at what we worked on this week. So, like I said, completed 3 weapon teams for the bolt action army, and with this I have a nice rounded out take all comers balanced force. So the first weapon that I completed was the medium mortar, the 81mm mortar, which is what's on the screen now. Now this weapon is, I just think, essential for any bolt action army. If you're going to play bolt action, you're going to want to get a mortar. They're really, really good. They allow you to see, shoot at units that you know out of line of sight. You do have to have a spotter for them, but you know, spotter's pretty. He just has to have line of sight. But long story short, it does allow you to, like very much in 40k, target units which you don't normally have line of sight to. Really, really good. Now the way that mortars work in bolt action is really interesting. What you do is you roll a dice to hit, just a single dice, and the first time you shoot at a unit, you hit on a 6+, so not very likely. You always hit on a 6, I should say. You always hit 6. No, can't be modified to 7. You always just hit on a 6. Then, if that unit doesn't move, next turn you hit them on a 5+, and they don't move again, you hit them on a 4+, and this keeps going obviously until you hit them on a 2+. Now, the interesting with mortars is, but you might be thinking, well, that's going to take forever for you to zoom in, right? Like, no. If you roll a dice and when you hit the enemy unit, from that point on, you count as being zeroed in. Basically, you've made the range. You guys know what range to shoot at now, which means from that point on, you hit them on a 2+. So, if you have a mortar and you're lucky, and the first time you shoot an enemy unit, you get a 6. If that enemy unit doesn't move, from that point on, you're going to be hitting them on 2s. I believe it's 2s. It might be 3s. You're hitting them really well, is the point. Now, if they do move, you go back to hitting on a 6, because they've moved. You've got to range back in. But it's really, really good. And why mortars are essential is cover mechanics and bolt action are a really key part to the game. And cover allows, the way if the enemy can stack various covers and go to ground and whatnot, it allows them to make units that are in cover really difficult to shift out. You could have a single unit in cover getting attacked by 2, maybe even 3 other units that are out in the open, and if they're equal size and composition, and that unit in cover has a good chance of winning. It really does, because covers, if you're stuck out in the open, you're a sitting duck. If you're stuck in some heavy cover, you're really difficult to shift. Really difficult to shift. But mortars are there. I keep mentioning this thing about action called balance. It's this crazy new idea. sorry. But no salt today, guys. No salt today. But what mortar allows you to do is to go, okay, you want to sit in cover with your hardcore veteran unit? You go for that. But I'm going to lob mortar shells in there, and sooner rather than later, I am going to hit you. And when I hit you with a mortar, it is hard. It is tough. When you get hit by a mortar, you get, it's like back in old 40k, you get little templates. But the long version short is that you'll probably get 4 or 5 hits with a mortar template. shouldn't. It's not too hard to do that. Now the enemy then has to choose whether they want to go to ground, in which case they won't get to shoot, and you've basically taken that unit out of the game, but it does halve the amount of damage that you're going to do. Or they have to take that mortar shell to the face. And then if they don't move after that, and with mortars, it's +2 to kill. So you normally wound veterans on 5+, for example. With a mortar, you're wounding veterans on 3s. That makes them as easy to splat as like inexperienced troops, because it's goddamn mortar shell. So yeah, really, really good. So what mortar do is they stop your opponent from being able to dig in, gun line, and blast away. Can't do that because if your enemy brings a mortar, your dug in units are going to have a really bad time. So mortars are really, really cool, and that's why I like them. So the next weapon that I painted up is the one that's on the screen now. It's going to go off in a second, but it's the super, super light howitzer of the Japanese. It's the Type 92 battalion gun, and it's not exactly safe for word, but I and my gaming group nicknamed it the Chode gun, because its barrel's so short. The gun is actually, including the gun the gun shield, the gun is actually wider than it is long. So it's actually a really nice little weapon, and it is essentially a cheeky way of getting a second mortar on the field. It operates very similarly to a mortar in terms of rules. I'll just bring those up now, actually, because I've got the rules in front of me. Type 92 70mm infantry gun. So yeah, absolutely. So what you can do is you can fire the weapon either as like directly, or you can fire it indirectly. So it's really cool. I believe you can. Anyway, it's some sort. Yeah, you definitely can. So yeah, it's a howitzer. It can either shoot directly at the target, drawing its line of fire over open sights in the normal way, or it can shoot indirectly. We'll use the indirect fire howitzer. So basically, guys, what's really good about this howitzer is it can fire indirectly. So like a mortar, it ranges in, starting on a 6, and then it gets better and better and better, and it can shoot things out of line of sight if you've got a spotter around. Or you can just shoot it normally, and it's got a pretty good range. So you're unlikely to be suffering the -1 to hit from long range. Now obviously if the enemy goes to ground and stuff, that can counter you shooting directly at them, but the point is it's a flexible mortar. It's a very flexible mortar. Now it is super light shell. It only has +1 penetration, so what that means is it's like +1 to kill. So the medium mortar actually has a more powerful shell than this. But that makes sense because the medium mortar is an 81mm shell, and the Type 92 infantry gun is a 70mm shell, so it's super light. Now you might be like, well, why would you ever take this thing? Well, the reason you take it is it's dirt cheap, guys. It's dirt cheap. It's for a regular veterancy, which is just straight down the middle. It's not inexperienced, not veteran. It's just regular. It's like, not conscripts, not guardsmen, not got conscripts, not veterans, but it's like guardsman level, right? It's only 40 points. That is so cheap. So cheap. We have to turn up to the field of battle with essentially 2 mortars. Mortars are already considered quite good in what action. You don't really want to turn up without one in your standard take all comers list. And the fact that the Japanese, in a funny sort of way, can turn up with 2 of them in a single platoon is really nice. So that's sort of the thing that sums up a lot of the Japanese units. The way what action has, though Warlords have balanced it, is like you don't have the best equipment, but it tends to be really, really affordable. And if it's affordable, it means it's quite points efficient, because it only has to kill This only has to kill 3 veterans, and it gets its points back. Well, guess what? That if you get a lucky shell, you could kill 3 veterans. You should kill 3 veterans over 1 or 2 turns. It's not too difficult to do that. So it's a really, really nice little gun. It's actually it's barely an artillery piece. It is barely an artillery piece. Really, it is like a little infantry support gun. It was actually the most commonly produced, again, artillery, open quotation marks, weapon that the Japanese used. And it was actually and they quite liked using it. The reports from the front were that it was good. It wasn't the most powerful, but it was lightweight. They could wheel it around. They could take it anywhere, and it was flexible, and it was just good at just lobbing shells at the enemy, which is all you really need from a light artillery piece. You don't want a big crew with a big gun that's going to need to be tracked everywhere. You know, if you're an infantry regiment or an infantry force, you need to be able to hoof it on foot sometimes, where you can hoof it on foot and you can drag these bad boys with you. So there you go. Now the last piece is the opposite. So we've had two sort of light bombardment weapons. The last big old gun is the one that's going to come up after this Type 92, is the anti-tank gun. And this is the Type 1 47mm anti-tank gun. Now this actually is what I would consider a later war piece in comparison to the other two that we've been talking about already. The Type 92 battalion gun was been around since 1932 to 1945. The Type 1 47mm anti-tank gun actually was only used by the Japanese for the last 3 years of the war, when you consider the Japanese were fighting from 1937, a bit, 2 years ahead of everyone else. Obviously not including the Chinese who they were fighting. It's a relatively late war piece for the Japanese, and they produce a surprisingly large amount. For them, the Japanese didn't have a huge industrial capacity, so they built about 2,300 of these things, which is pretty good, to be honest. They only built like 2,300 of the Hargo tank, and they were building that for a lot longer. So it is a really solid anti-tank weapon. Reports from the front lines were that it was good, and when the Americans encountered it, it was actually one of the few weapons that the Japanese had that could reliably knock out a Sherman. Now on the Western Front, with Germany and everything, Shermans were seen as light, barely medium tanks. But in the Pacific, the Sherman was almost like the Tiger tank of the Pacific Theatre. It was really good considering all the island hopping. It was actually a really nice heavy tank that or heavy-ish tank that the Americans could bring with them. Most of the fighting, I believe, was actually done between sort of Stuarts and the Japanese armour. So the Japanese used to struggle against the Sherman very, very much so. That's where you get these reports of Japanese soldiers sitting in a hole with a shell and a hammer, where they'd wait for the Sherman to drive over the top of them and blow themselves up. That's what they had to resort to, because their regular anti-tank weapons couldn't deal with them, and their own armour couldn't deal with the Shermans. But this Type 1 anti-tank gun was actually pretty good, and it was pretty well respected by the Americans. They called it an excellent weapon. So there you go. Now, why do I have this in my army? Well, quite frankly, if you look at what I have available to me in terms of anti-tank weapons in this army, I've got a low velocity light anti-tank gun on the Hargo tank, which it's so bad. Instead of being pen 4, like a regular light anti-tank gun, it's only pen 3, and then over half range that becomes pen 2. And pen 2 is only as good as an anti-tank rifle, so I've got a super light anti-tank gun on my tank, I've got an anti-tank rifle, and I have 2 suicide anti-tank guys, which, whilst good, are going to struggle to get to the enemy. Even with the various Japanese special rules, they're probably going to struggle to get to the enemy. So what I need is something that I can take, that isn't too expensive, that isn't going to be like a really heavy thing, like a tank, like a Chiha Kai Shinto tank, and can just sling rounds at the tanks that I'm likely to face. Because Hargo versus the Stuart's going to win that. And Hargo versus like an armoured car, the armoured car's got a good chance of winning that. The Hargo tank is not really sufficient. So one of the main armies that I'm likely to face is going to be the Russians, because that's what my brother has. Well, we sort of share a Russian army, but it's basically his at this point. And the British, because one of my good friends who we actually got into Port Action at the same time, he went for the British and I went for the Japanese, because he's more likely to face other players, whereas I'm only really likely to face him and my brother. So British for him makes sense, because he can fight on the Western or on the Eastern Front. Well, Far Eastern. So Pacific. So I need something that can deal with some British tanks. Some that can actually deal with the armoured cars, that can actually deal with the tanks. So having a straight up, no nonsense medium anti-tank gun It's just really good for that. That's what it is, really. It's a straight. There's nothing special. It hasn't got any fancy schmancy rules. It literally is just a straight up medium anti-tank gun, and that's really just what you want from this weapon. You don't want it to have anything else. You don't want it to be messing around. You want it to just be pen +5, so over half range, pen +4. You shoot that thing at some light tanks, some medium tanks, and it's gonna hurt them, and that's what you need. So when I'm likely to face a T-34-85, this bad boy is gonna be able to handle that. I'm likely to face a Stuart or a Daimler armored car. This bad boy is gonna be able to take care of that. So yeah, that's why I've got it. So with that, when you take a look at the whole army, what I'm likely to turn up to the field of battle with is probably not the Type 92 light artillery piece, but more than likely I'm going to turn up with a medium anti-tank gun, a medium mortar and a medium machine gun as my support teams. And then the plan is to have the armoured car, because that's a double MMG beast that just spits out hot lead. The Hargo, which is also great at spitting out lead. So between the Hargo and the armoured car and the medium machine gun, I've got 5 medium machine guns there. That's a lot of DACA. That's a lot of DACA. And then I've got the mortar for digging enemy units out of cover, and I've got the medium anti-tank gun for dealing with any potential armour that I'm going to come across. And then in terms of the rest of the force, for 1,000 points, it's going to be a sniper team, an anti-tank rifle team, and then four squads of infantry. Probably regular, depending. I'm not quite sure how the points are going to be, but 4 squads of infantry. I'm going to have 3 light machine guns in there. I know light machine guns aren't ideal for the bot action players out there, but I'm a little limited by the models. I don't necessarily want to buy another full box of 30 infantry just to be able to flesh out my squads with just rifles. I'm happy to take a few light machine guns. Light machine guns are still good. So I'm going to have lots of light machine guns, lots of infantry. So the end force is going to be about 28 line infantry, 3 support teams, and then an anti-tank, 2 vehicles, and then 1 sniper team, 1 anti-tank rifle team, and then junior officer. And that'll do. Yeah, and that's what I run around with. And that'll be my 1,000 points. So it's going to be, 28 line infantry, probably overall, that's 28, 30, 32, 35, 41 infantry, plus an officer and a dog's body. So 43 infantry and 2 vehicles. Should be. Am I missing? So I think it's going to be about 44 infantry and 2 vehicles. I think I missed out the medium machine gun team. So there you go. Oh, no, I didn't. 41 infantry and 2 vehicles. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an 1,000 point bolt action army. Now take a look at it's like the old Testament. Take a look at the army. Now back to me. Now back to your army. Now back to me. Sadly, your army's not me, but it could be me if you painted and played bolt action. And the point is that I'm trying to make is that I love 40k, and I'm really, really enjoying getting into my guardsmen again. Every time I get hacked off the 40k, I just go and paint some more guardsmen, and I fall in love with the hobby again. There's no doubt about that. And but what I would say is, in my bolt action army, 1,000 points. I never need to buy another model ever again. The meta doesn't shift. There's not an FAQ that invalidates my army. Forge. There's nothing where half my units get discontinued and shoved into legends or anything like that. With this army, it's bought. I've got a little bit of over. I've got a couple of extra officers. I've got a couple of extra weapons teams. And what we're looking at here, guys, is a 1,000 point army that's rarely going to change. If it does change, the most I'll have to buy to future-proof it is maybe, rather than buying another full box of 30 infantry, just buying a 10-man metal squad. Warlord does 10-man metal infantry squads just as a little top-up. It's like, rather than 30 guys, £25, it's like 10 guys for £15. So it does cost way more man per man, but you're not buying more models than you don't need. So I quite like that you buy what you need, right? So I'm probably going to buy like if I do buy any more, if I find that I just need to get rid of some of the inefficiencies in the army, I'll buy like a little 10-man box of guys. Great, that'll do me. It doesn't mess around. This is a 1,000 point army. I never need to change it again. If I wanted to now, what I would better serve is actually, what I'm thinking of doing is picking up, is buying a United States Marine Corps army. Because then, whenever I ever have someone over who I'm trying to get into the hobby, I can just be like, hey, do you want to have a game about action? Guess what? I've got 2 fully painted armies, 1 Marine Corps and 1 Jap. So let's face each other. How cool would that be? And then I've got 2 1,000-point armies. And the Marines are even less. The Marines are way more expensive points-wise than the Japanese stuff. So I probably only need like 20 infantry and 2 vehicles, and I'll be done for Marines. It's half the size of this Japanese army. So I'm really tempted to pick that up after I've completed the platoon, of course. So that's what I love about Bot Action. It's cheap, it's fun, it's easy to get into. The plastic, all the models are they're not. I would say the models aren't equal to Games Workshop's later stuff, because Games Workshop's been putting out some incredible stuff lately. To be fair, they are the kings of model molding. I won't take that away from them. But the models, the Japanese infantry, for example, they are no worse whatsoever than the Imperial Guard kit that you're going to put together. For example, they're just as good. If not, they're probably easier to put together than Guardsmen. They're probably just above Guardsmen in terms of how easy the kits are, how good the kits are. No issues whatsoever. So yeah, so the models are good. The game's cheap. The rules are fun. What is not to like? That's what I'm trying to say. So that'll wrap it up for the Bot Action bit of this video. I would just say that obviously it's going to be difficult to do any battle reports with the Bot Action army at the moment, because the UK is in full lockdown at least until December. Being realistic, it's probably going to be for 3 months. Just that's what happened last time. They said it was going to be a short time. It went to 3 months. It's probably going to be the same thing this time. But what my plan is, moving on, speaking about wider channel stuff, the plan is that the moment that it's, we're allowed to see people again, Bolt Action battle reports. We're going to get, I know that Johnny, my brother, who runs the Scholar Progenium battle channel, go and check it out. He has been itching to play some Bot Action. He's been itching. So I know that we'll be able to definitely get some sort of Bolt Action battle report. Even if it is like Japanese versus Germans or something ahistorical, doesn't really matter. We're just going to throw some models down and have some fun. So that's, I know that he's itching to play that. But in terms of what I'm working on in the future, well, like I said, I'm going to be working on 3rd Platoon first. I know I have the secret project, which I know I haven't talked about. It's a new army coming to the channel. I've put it on the back burner for now. It's like 80% done, to be fair. But the reason I put it on the back burner is because I actually just want to paint some Guard. This is a Guard channel. This is Guard. We do flirt with Bolt Action. We do flirt with Gene Silicate. We do very occasionally flirt with Black Templars. But at the end of the day, this is a Guard channel, and we want to see Guard content. So for until the end of the year, I would predict, till the end of the year, it's going to be 3rd Platoon. And what I need to do for 3rd Platoon is I have 3 infantry squads that need to be completed. Now I am actually about 50% through one of those already. I've done all the base colours. I just need to do all the base colours is only half. I then need to apply the washes. I then need to do the edge highlighting and the dry brushing, and then I need to do the basing. So that's what's left, and that's what's 50% done. But let's say I get that squad done this week, plus I make a start on the 2nd squad, keep that momentum going. By the end of November, I should have all of the line infantry done for 3rd Platoon. Now I've already got a couple of characters done for that platoon already. So the priest is already done, and the junior officer's already done. Okay, in fact I've done 2 junior officers for this 3rd Platoon, but I'm just going to do one. The other junior officer can go into 4th Platoon. So what I have left over to do once all going into December, the plan will be to do the veterans, the heavy weapon team, which I've already got built up. The veterans are going to be plasma veterans, standard. The heavy weapon team will probably actually be triple las cannon heavy weapon team, which should be pretty cool, just to mix it up rather than having triple mortars again. and then it's going to be a senior officer, a commissar. I've got a brilliant commissar model lined up. I can't wait to do it for you guys. It's a very rare one. And then I also have got to do the abhumans. Now we've done Ogryns, we've done Bulgarins. I have to decide what I want to do for my auxiliary support. Okay, now I think it should probably be Ratlings. It should probably be Ratlings. The thing is I don't own any Ratlings, so I'd have to go and buy Ratling models. Now you might be like, what's the big deal with that, Mordian Law? You know, use your Patreon money. It's not a case of money, guys. It's a case of every time I buy models for this army, I extend the length of the Great Mordian Restoration Project. If I buy 10 Ratlings, it takes me 2 weeks to paint them up. Then that is 2 weeks of me not restoring models that I already own. So I'm thinking maybe Rough Riders? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I think it probably should be Ratlings though. I think it should be. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.